Hello again, and welcome to our channel. Today, we are going to start on a journey through time to investigate one of the most important political shifts in the course of human history. This shift is the transition from a republic to an empire in the political system of the Romans. Come along with me as we dissect this intriguing story of political machinations, struggles for power, and the ascent of emperors. When the 6th century BCE began, Rome was nothing more than a small city-state in the center of Italy. This is where our story begins. Although Rome was ruled by kings throughout this time period, it was nevertheless subject to the authority of its Etruscan neighbors. The Roman people, on the other hand, eventually developed political fatigue with monarchical authority, which led to the foundation of a republic. The Roman Republic, which existed from 509 BCE to 27 CE, was based on a system of checks and balances, with power being spread among a number of different institutions. This system was in place from 509 BCE until 27 CE. The Senate and the assemblies were the Republic's two primary legislative branches, and they formed its fundamental structure. The magistrates were elected officials who were responsible for the governance of the Republic. The Senate was an assembly of affluent and prominent men who provided advice to the magistrates. They were instrumental in creating both domestic and international policy and legislation. On the other hand, the assemblies were democratic bodies that were made up of Roman citizens who were separated into various classes based on their level of income. They were able to vote on laws, elect magistrates, and even declare war if they so choose. The Roman Senate, also referred to simply as the Senatus, was an influential group made up of highly regarded citizens who wielded tremendous political and social power inside Roman society. An assembly of Rome's most distinguished inhabitants, it was initially made up of perhaps around 300 members who were known as senators. In ancient Rome, Senate membership was initially determined by birthright, with senators hailing from the patrician families that comprised Rome's aristocratic upper class. However, as the Republic grew larger, plebeians or ordinary citizens were also allowed access into the Senate. This led to a political structure that was more welcoming to a diverse range of people. The magistrates, who were elected officials and were responsible for the governance of the Republic, consulted with the Senate as an advisory council. They discussed issues concerning the state, including legislation, financial matters, and foreign policy. The senators, with their huge amounts of experience and knowledge, played an essential part in the process of determining the path that the Republic would take. Senators were often elected to their positions for life due to the high regard in which their offices were held. They had access to public finances, important networks, and numerous appointments in government and administration, among other perks and benefits. They had these privileges and benefits. It was anticipated by senators that they would be models of moral character and dignity, as well as experts in the fields in which they were responsible. The Senate was more of an advisory body than a legislative one, despite the fact that it retained a significant amount of power. The popular assemblies, which were political entities that represented Roman citizens, held the authority to make the ultimate decisions. This was the case throughout Roman history. In the Roman Republic, the assemblies, also known as the comitia, served as the democratic institutions. They offered a forum in which Roman residents could have their voices heard and contribute to the decision-making process. There were a few distinct kinds of gatherings, each of which had a distinct function and included a unique membership. The Comitia Centuriata, also known as the Centuriate Assembly, was the most important gathering that took place. Roman citizens were divided into groups that were termed centuries, and this division was based on factors like their wealth and their military service. The more centuries that the wealthier citizens held and the more centuries they held meant that they had more voting power. The Centuriate Assembly was responsible for electing the highest-ranking magistrates, including as consuls and praetors, and possessed the power to declare war and enact laws. It was a body whose primary concern was with military affairs as well as legislation pertaining to problems of defense and public order. The Comitia Tributa, also known as the Tribal Assembly, was an additional important assembly. It was organized according to geographical divisions known as tribes, and it encompassed both the city of Rome and the rural lands outside of it. Regardless of their level of wealth or social standing, members of every tribe had the same amount of voting power. The tribal assembly was responsible for electing magistrates of lesser rank, passing laws pertaining to domestic affairs, and having the authority to prosecute Roman citizens convicted of serious crimes. It was tasked with representing the plebeians' interests and playing an important part in addressing societal and economic concerns. The last assembly, known as the Comitia Curiata, was the oldest, but by the end of the Republic, its significance had been much decreased. It was composed of 30 curia, which are also known as religious and social organizations. These curiae represented various aspects of Roman society. The Comitia Curiata was responsible for ceremonial tasks, like ratifying the election of magistrates and giving its stamp of approval to particular laws. Within the Roman Republic, the delicate balance of power that was forged was a product of the combination of the Senate and the assemblies. While the assemblies were in charge of making sure the public voices were heard, the Senate was responsible for representing the knowledge and expertise of Rome's upper class. This system of checks and balances was a significant factor in the Republic's capacity to remain stable and strong over the course of several centuries. Lucius Junius Brutus, who was one of the first consuls and led the revolt that led to the destruction of the last Roman king, was one of the most prominent political personalities in Rome during the early days of the Republic. The consuls wielded executive authority for a period of 1 year and were the highest-ranking magistrates in the Roman Empire. They were responsible for leading the army, enforcing the laws, and preserving order. They were elected by the assemblies and given this responsibility. In the years that followed, the Roman Republic engaged in a number of military campaigns that resulted in the expansion of its dominance and territorial holdings. Nevertheless, expansion brought about the emergence of new difficulties. Growing social unrest, economic inequality, and power struggles among the nation's political elites were all challenges that the Republic confronted. One of the defining points in the transition from Republic to Empire happened in the 1st century BCE with the ascent to power of two significant figures, Julius Caesar and Gaius Octavius, afterwards known as Augustus. This was one of the pivotal periods in the transformation of the Republic. Julius Caesar was a Roman military leader and statesman who rose to prominence as a powerful figure and gained increasing popularity among the common Roman population. The victories he won in battle and the political maneuvers he engaged in garnered him a tremendous amount of influence and support. Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his army in the year 49 BCE, defying the Senate and setting off a civil war in the process. At the end of the day, he emerged triumphant, thereby putting an end to the republican system. Caesar's triumph, however, was short-lived because he was murdered in 44 BCE by a group of senators who feared his growing power. This led to the end of Caesar's reign. This event threw Rome into further disarray and prepared the way for the ascension of Gaius Octavius, whom he had adopted as his heir. After Caesar's death, Gaius Octavius, better known as Augustus, deftly guided the Roman Empire through the stormy aftermath. He triumphed over his enemies and became the first emperor of Rome in 27 BCE after emerging victorious from the conflict. Augustus deftly preserved the outward appearance of a republic while simultaneously concentrating power in his own hands. Augustus oversaw the transformation of the Roman political system from a republic into an empire during his reign. Although it maintained part of its former authority, the Senate came to be more and more submissive to the emperor. Augustus was cautious to strike a balance between the various authorities at his disposal and presented himself to the public as the first among equals, rather than an autocratic leader. The Pax Romana, an era of relative peace and stability that lasted for nearly 2 centuries, started under the reign of Augustus and lasted until his successor, Tiberius. In addition to fostering economic growth and instituting a number of administrative changes, he also restructured the armed forces. Augustus established a pattern that would be followed by subsequent emperors, and his successors continued to exercise autocratic power even after his death. This eventually led to the formation of a centralized imperial administration. Nero, who succeeded Augustus as emperor of Rome, is remembered as one of the most notorious rulers in Roman history. His rule, which began in the year 54 CE, was marked by excess political repression and a disastrous fire that wiped out a large portion of Rome. The excesses of Nero were the catalyst for widespread discontent and rebellion, which marked a turning point in the history of Rome. The transition from a republic to an empire brought about fundamental shifts in the political structure and administrative structure of the nation. The military was under the direct command of the emperors, who who also held the title of princeps, which translates to first citizen, and had the authority to make and enforce laws. Although it is still in existence, the Senate has been reduced to more of a ceremonial role and has lost much of its political significance. It is essential to keep in mind that the transformation of the Roman government from a republic into an empire was not a spontaneous occurrence, but rather a protracted process that was shaped by a variety of different historical circumstances. Rome's cultural and legal systems remained to exert an influence on Western civilization for many centuries after the city's political situation had shifted significantly. And with that, we come to the conclusion of this fascinating account of the political system of ancient Rome, which traces its development from a republic into an empire. The Romans left an indelible influence on history, from the earliest days of the Senate and assemblies to the development of significant people such as Julius Caesar and Augustus, both of whom played important roles in Roman history. Come back with us the following time as we delve even further into the fascinating stories of bygone civilizations. In the meantime, just keep in mind that the past is a treasure chest just waiting to be opened. I am grateful that you decided to watch. If you want to remain up to date on our most recent episodes, make sure to give them a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, if you have any ideas for topics that could be covered in the future, please leave them in the comments section below. Keep your sense of wonder alive till we meet again and never stop adventuring.